Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's another episode of the Command Zone podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Weeks. And joining me today, we've got Josh Murphy.
Murph, it is me, and we're here to talk about a really cool Commander deck upgrade. Isn't that right, Rachel?
I'm so excited about this one. This is the Graveyard Overdrive Precon for Modern Horizons 3. We're talking Jund today, baby. Red, green, and black. We're going to talk about what comes in the Precon, when you buy it off the shelf, what's in the box. And we're going to give you 10 cards to add and 10 cards to take out to get this deck in peak fighting shape. By the time this comes out, you probably already know that I played Disa on game nights.
Yes.
I love this deck. You should watch the episode. See how well it does.
Yeah, if you want a super upgraded version of this Precon, like you can see that deck list down in the show notes below of that game nights episode.
Check it out. But before we get into it, if you want to pick up any of the singles, any of the sealed product that we talk about here today, go to cardkingdom.com/command. Modern Horizons 3 is here. It's got 4 Commander Precons. We didn't expect it, but here they are. And it's got a ton of really powerful singles for the Commander format. Modern Horizons always shakes up the format a lot, so keep an eye out for singles that you need for your decks, and you can get them all in one place when you shop at Card Kingdom. I love that I can just get like 3 of those and 5 of these and 6 of these, and I can put them all in one box and they'll show up, and I can have a weekend of doing my magic chores, just updating with all of the new cards that come out. So you can pick them up at Card Kingdom, and you can do so while supporting the show if you use cardkingdom.com/command.
And if you go to ultrapro.com/command, you can get some excellent Ultra Pro products to sleeve your Magic cards in. This deck is all about Jund and all about Tarmogoyfs. Mm-hmm. So if you want to just bling it out with Tarmogoyf sleeves, they probably have that.
I don't know.
Right? I think they have Tarmogoyf sleeves. If not Ultra Pro, please get on that. But at the very least,
they definitely have Disa sleeves.
Exactly. There's all sorts of stuff that you can buy, from sleeves to play mats to dice, just anything that you could ever want or need to play Magic with. And it always looks really cool. They have fire sales on there all the time of like 10, 20, 30% off. So just browse the website, again, ultrapro.com/command. Just take a look at what's there. You'll find awesome stuff that you never even knew that you wanted, and you can get it at a good price. Again, ultrapro.com/command.
Yeah, if you like the new profile art that they have on cards.
Those are slick.
I know it's like sort
sleeves.
of a cool pop art thing. They're on sleeves. They've got playmats. They also have a little binder that has it on there.
Ooh.
It's very cool. I like those a lot. ultrapro.com/command. Finally, you can support us directly by going to patreon.com/commandzone. All of our patrons help make this show and game nights and extra turns happen. Plus, they get some cool perks for doing so. They get access to extra turns, game nights a day early without ads. You get to watch it before there's any spoilers. And sometimes our patrons will help us catch little mistakes that happen in the game, and we get to fix them and edit before the public sees.
Exactly. I love you patrons so much. You have saved my butt more times than I can count. So everybody who is out there watching extra turns and game nights a day early and saying, you know that this is wrong, right? And me being like, shoot. Thanks, I can fix that.
We can fix that.
All right. Thank you so much.
Very, very helpful. Plus, we shout out one lucky patron every single podcast episode. And this one is dedicated to
Hellfire Dragon. Hellfire, you rock?
Dragon?
Dragon, you rock?
I don't know. That's their patron name. I love it. It felt very Jund.
Beautiful. Love it. Hellfire Dragon. That is the coolest patron name I have ever seen, I think. If that is actually your birth name, that would be even more sick.
Whoa.
Probably not.
Whoa. Your parents are awesome. All right, let's talk about this Precon. So this is the Graveyard Overdrive Modern Horizons 3 Precon. We're going to talk about some cards that you can add and some cards you can take out to get this deck in peak fighting shape for only a budget of $50. But first, we're going to get to know the deck, tell you about the deck, so that we get to do the appropriate upgrade for it. And first, we're going to meet the face commander, starting with my girl, Disa.
Disa, it's 2 and a Jund for a total of 5 mana. Legendary creature. Whenever a Lurgoyf permanent card is put into your graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, put it onto the battlefield. And whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a Tarmogoyf token. And this, in and of itself, is a 5/6.
Oh.
So then the question is, Rachel, what's a Tarmogoyf token for those that are unfamiliar with the card
The mighty
Tarmogoyf?
have fallen from one of the most expensive Magic cards of all time to a token.
Well, not of all time, but as far as like playable Magic cards that you could usually take to tournaments, Tarmogoyf used to be like over $100.
All time.
It was crazy because like
Tarmogoyf was one of the most played cards in Modern. There's famous stories about this Magic card, and it's extra 1 point of toughness. Actually, go watch the Ristic Studies video about Tarmogoyf. It's great.
Sam's video. So good.
It's so good. But if you're not familiar, Tarmogoyf is a Lurgoyf.
Lurgoyf.
His power is equal to the number of card types among cards in all graveyards, and its toughness is equal to that number plus 1. The token does have a mana cost of 1 and a green,
which is bizarre.
It's a token copy of Tarmogoyf.
It's super cute because they're trying to make it literally exactly Tarmogoyf as the Tarmogoyf card exists, but in token form, which is just the neatest.
It's so cute.
I love it.
This deck is a love letter to Modern Jund.
Yeah.
Boomer Jund, as it is lovingly been called.
Yeah, Modern Jund is not quite the same anymore as what it once was, like Tarmogoyf. I remember when Modern Masters came out, and this card was over $100, and the price of the card went up because people were opening it and saying, okay, now let me get 3 more for my deck because I want to build Modern Jund now. That's how cool of a deck Jund was back in its heyday. Unfortunately, it is not quite what it once was, but now we are taking very cool cards like this and seeing them in Commander, which is really, really cool.
It's pretty cool. And I mean, Modern Jund is based on a very simple principle of competitive Magic, of just trading, of just 2-for-1s.
Yeah.
Spending 1 card to get 2 things, to get an opponent's card or maybe another card of yours back. It's just general grindy value, good cards. And a lot of the cards that are in Modern Jund are in this Precon, which is so fun and such a cool reference for people who are a fan of Magic. But let's talk about Disa, because I do think this commander is really neat.
Yeah.
She's pretty expensive.
At 5, isn't it crazy they were saying 5 mana is expensive?
I know. But there's so much value on this. Like, when she comes down, if you have evasive attackers, you can make up to 3 Tarmogoyfs, because if you hit 1 for each player. And then she has this funky second ability that lets you cheat Lurgoyfs of any kind, Tarmogoyf, or any of the various Lurgoyfs and the new ones, into play by discarding them, by milling them, by other shenanigans, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yeah, as it's templated, that's actually Disa's first ability, but yes.
Yeah, it's
other cool things that you can do with it. So there's a little bit of graveyard stuff. You want to be attacking and dealing damage. So it feels like the deck kind of goes in a lot of different ways and or can have a lot of different scenarios in order for you to get value.
Yeah, so I think we'll expect this deck to have some evasive attackers, especially cheap ones that come down under Disa. Probably some discard outlets, so you can cheat these Goyfs into play, and certainly self-mill, so your Goyfs have strong power and toughness, and you can cheat Goyfs into play in the meantime.
Yeah, so Disa, really, really cool. But Rachel, what is the other commander that comes in this deck, and is that a better choice?
This is Korum, the Undertaker. 1 black, red, green, so 4 mana altogether for a 0/5 human warrior. Korum gets +X/+O, where X is the greatest power among creature cards in all graveyards. When Korum attacks, each player mills a card. During each of your turns, you may play a land and cast a spell from among cards in graveyards that were put there from libraries this turn.
Oh, that's pretty neat.
Korum is actually quite powerful as well, and this is a much more general commander. Like, when you attack with it, everybody mills 1. If you hit lands, you can play that. If you hit spells, you can play the best one from among them. It turns all of your self-mill and general mills. It turns all of your cereal into value. Part of a balanced breakfast.
Jund, part of a balanced breakfast.
So it does a little milling on its own, and then it gives you an opportunity to cast or play cards that it mills this turn.
Yeah, so it doesn't really have the aspect of it really wants you to attack, but it very much has that value-based stuff from the graveyard. You mill, and that's how you get value in order to out-jund your opponents, which I really like.
Yeah, I think if you look at these two commanders next to each other, you're like, okay, so we're definitely doing self-mill stuff. This is like certainly a graveyard deck, as Graveyard Overdrive suggests.
If you came into this with the name of Graveyard Overdrive, and you're like, dang,
It's
this is a graveyard deck? You might want to get your priorities checked. But
Quorum's very powerful. It's certainly much more general than Disa. But we're going to break down what's in the deck to talk about what commander serves the deck better, and then we'll talk about how to upgrade it. But first, we're going to talk about some of the more notable reprints in the deck. That's anything that's worth over $5 at time of recording. Of course, these prices will go down once those reprints are announced, because that is how reprints work. But you can take this value and compare it to reprint values of previous precons, because all of those are taken before the reprints are announced.
Yep.
So all of these are relative, but good. The first one's a banger.
yeah, so of the notable reprints, there are 10 total that are $5 or more. And the most expensive of those is the Reaver Cleaver. That's the tuna red equipment that gives something +1/+1 trample. And whenever it deals damage, create that many treasure tokens. Which this is a super sick card that I've always really wanted to play with, but it's always been a little bit on the pricier side for something that seems a little bit casual. I mean, treasure making is like really ridiculously good, but it feels very much like a casual card, and so I've always kind of balked at the price. So seeing it here, getting that price down, will get it in the hands of more players, which is great. Love that.
Bringing this price down is a really big deal, especially with how popular equipment strategies are.
Absolutely.
This next one is a favorite among, commander players and all players. It's Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. 1 green for an elf scout. She's the one that taps and adds mana equal to the greatest power you have.
Yep.
She also draws cards when you make big things.
Because why the heck not?
Yeah, Selvala is going to be powerful in any creature strategy, especially ones that intends on making big ol' Goyfs. So it's going to be great in this deck, currently worth $19.
Yeah. The next one is Archon of Cruelty. That's the big one, the 8 mana 6/6 black flyer that when it enters the battlefield or attacks, target opponent sacks a creature, planeswalker discards a card, loses 3 life. You do the opposite of drawing a card and gaining 3 life. So really, really popular reanimation target is this, or I guess you can just ramp it out and you'll still have a very good time with it, but reanimation is primarily where this card goes.
8 mana is a lot to cast.
Yeah. That's really cool.
The next one is Maskwood Nexus. It turns all your creatures into, you guessed it, Goyfs.
Tarmogoyfs.
So now anytime you mill a creature, if you have Maskwood Nexus on board, you get to put it into play.
Ooh, baby.
With Disa, of course.
Yep.
Maskwood Nexus sitting at $11, very popular in typal strategies.
And Archon of Cruelty is $16 if we didn't mention. Junji is the next one. That's the black dragon spirit from Neon Dynasty. That one is currently sitting at about $9, so pretty reasonable.
One of my favorite planeswalkers of all time, it's Grist, the Hunger Tide, getting a reprint here. I love Grist. This does everything I want. Like, I can reanimate it, I can bring it back to the battlefield, I can mill, I make tokens, I can destroy things, and it's very difficult to get at for how cheap it is, and it makes a body to block.
Yeah, the only thing I don't like about Grist is literally every time it gets played, people are like, how does this interact with this, because of the weird text of it being a creature sometimes and
that's
not
what makes
other
it
times.
fun, Murph.
Having lots of rules questions does not make it fun.
If you have a Maskwood Nexus and a Disa on board and you mill Grist, you cheated Grist into play.
You certainly can, yes.
Because it's a creature.
and it's cool, but...
It's cool. Grist currently sitting at $8.50. Nice to have it be more accessible.
Yeah. Chandra's Ignition, next one sitting at $7.50. That's a target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and opponents. Pretty neat to include.
Up next is Garruk Apex Predator. $6.50 for this old 7-mana planeswalker, getting a reprint finally.
Yep. Lightning Greaves at $6.50. I'm not going to read it. It's Lightning Greaves. You know what it is. Love to see it get lower in price.
And Zeatora, the Incinerator, making it onto this list as well. A 6-mana Jund Dragon. Fling some stuff, gives you some treasures. It's a good top end for this deck. You can see that a number of the things that they printed are just big creatures. So that's an interesting subplot to keep an eye out for. Zeotor is sitting at $5.50.
Yeah, pretty cool.
But how much are the Tarmogoyf tokens worth?
Well, we don't know. We literally do not know. They don't exist.
Are they as expensive as regular Tarmogoyfs? That's my question.
Probably not. So I can't imagine that they would be. They come in this deck, so...
So those are all the big reprints in this deck. That's everything over $5. All the stuff that you're like, oh, good, I don't have to buy another Lightning Grease. We're going to talk about the total reprint value of this deck. That's everything in the deck that is reprinted. It doesn't include the 15 new cards. There's 2 main set cards and 12 basic lands. So it only encapsulates 71 cards in this box. It's also worth noting before we give you the actual value that this deck is currently pre-ordering at $65. So our math is going to be based around that price. If you can get it for less than that, then it's a better deal than what we're saying. If you can get it for more expensive than that, it's slightly worse. $65 is the current benchmark for it. All of that out of the way, I'll let you announce it, Murph, but
Thanks.
The total reprint value is
$165.75. Sorry, I didn't let you do the drum roll.
I was drumming.
Yeah, you were drumming. And
then I drummed over you.
I did not build any suspense at all. That was entirely my bad. But $165.75.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at this number, you're like, that's a ton of value in a box. That's guaranteed. You get $165 worth of reprint value. But it's a little misleading considering that this is pre-ordering for more expensive than most Precons.
Yeah.
So what I've been doing is we've been calculating a bang for your buck value, which helps you take the reprint value and divide it by how much you spent on it. And it'll tell you how much reprint value you're getting for your $1 spent. And that'll give you a little bit more information.
Yeah, so for this one, if you buy it at $65, you get $2.55 of cards for each of your $1 spent, which is pretty darn average, all things considered.
Yeah,
I mean,
fine.
as far as like recent precons, like it's a tad lower than average, but well within the realm of average. So I definitely won't feel bad about this reprint value.
Yeah, I think this is a perfectly acceptable reprint value. The 2023 average bang for your buck was $2.60, which is about what we can see in this box. This price is lower than both the bang for your buck value in OTJ and MKM, significantly lower than Murders at Karlov Manor, which was at $3.73. Those precons were absurd.
And amazing. But the higher costed reprints like the Archon of Cruelty, the Selvala, the Reaver Cleaver, I really do like seeing those because those are like $15 to $20 cards that you can, even if you don't like them in this deck, you can pull them out, slot them into something else. And just having a bigger supply of those helps out a lot. So
there's also 15 new cards in this deck, as opposed to the normal 10 new cards in OTJ or in Murders at Karlov Manor. It's also the second highest reprint value in MH3, second to the lands list, to the green-blue list, which averages around $2.29 of bang for your buck, so it averages fairly low.
So all that being said, you're not feeling bad about this, but you're not going around high-fiving everybody for how good of the reprint value that is for this deck pre-ordering, again, at $65.
Yeah. All right, so that's the financial breakdown of this deck. We're going to get into the mechanical breakdown. We're going to tell you about the nuts and bolts of this deck, which means, of course, it's time for the
stats. I miss saying stats. Okay, anyway, so this deck stats has 13 pieces of ramp, 7 pieces of draw, 11 pieces of interaction, 3 board wipes, 39 lands, 12 of those being basic, 11 Lurgoyfs, 11 self-mill, 3 reanimate effects, and 4 reanimate targets. And 4 reanimate targets, we're saying things that are like about 6 mana or more that probably reasonably do something once they hit the table.
We're not including Sir Conrad, but we are including Zeotora.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's a bird's eye view of this deck. I would say 13 ramp is like perfectly within expectation here. 7 draw is low.
Yeah, that's pretty low.
I would say, especially considering this number includes Yavimaya Elder, which draws you lands.
That's counting the Yavimaya Elder as a draw source?
It draws you lands,
I
and
mean,
it draws additional cards. It puts you up. Like, it is technically a draw spell. It's not a ramp spell.
Yeah, but
so
then having 6 other than Yavimaya Elder, that feels really low.
It's quite low.
Yeah.
I would say that this deck is like, it's good because a lot of the cards in it are 2-for-1s, so you hypothetically don't need as many cards. You can be efficient with them. But in Commander, it's not good enough to be efficient. You need more cards to keep up with the game.
That's the biggest problem. Even if you're 2-for-1ing somebody, well, you're 2-for-1ing one player, or you're 2-for-1ing, yeah.
You're 1-for-0ing 2 players.
Exactly. There's still a player that's up, even if you're taking your one targets and getting rid of something from one player and then another player. Yeah, then that other player is up. And so that 2-for-1, just the math doesn't quite math for Jund. So Junding them out is harder when you don't have card draw.
You do need card draw.
You need card draw.
So we need to bolster that clearly. 11 pieces of interaction is acceptable, especially with 3 board wipes. 39 lands is a little higher than I run. I tend to go 38. But in a graveyard deck, it's kind of nice to have that selection guaranteed that you hit the land drops to get to your 5-mana commander.
Yeah. I would rather have lands be a little bit high than a little bit low.
Yeah. 11 Lurgoyfs honestly seems low. This is including, there's a Changeling spell. I believe there's just 1 in the deck currently. And 11 Self-Mill also seems a hair low for both commanders being primarily based in Self-Mill. Certainly too low for Quorum.
Yeah, it feels like the deck is pretty split in what it wants to do. It has like this Lurgoyf plan, it has the self-mill plan, and like we also said, going a little bit further down, we have about 3-ish reanimate targets, or excuse me, 4 reanimate targets and 3 reanimate effects. So it's like pulling in a bunch of different directions. Do we want to mill? Do we want to attack? Do we want to reanimate things? Do we want to play Lurgoyfs? Like, what's going on here?
I think what it says is that it's doing sort of a Boomer Jund thing, which is it can do it all.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be able to remove and grind and to be on the aggressive. And that's sort of a difficult thing to balance, especially when you're trying to leave the door open to this second commander in Quorum. So I think a big thing of what we're going to do in this upgrade is trying to streamline what the deck is doing, make sure it has a very clear plan for you, and make sure that these numbers get a little bit higher, because 11, 11, 3, 4, those numbers are so low that you really expect something to be the dominant plan in the deck, and there isn't a super strong direction.
Yeah, so you basically just kind of have to pick what you want to be that dominant plan. Mm-hmm. Do you want to go further into the mill, or do you want to go further into the Lurgoyf plan?
But there are a lot of slots dedicated to Lurgoyfs, so I do think that this deck is probably best served by Disa in the command zone, and 11 pieces of self-mill is not nearly enough to fuel Quorum regularly. Mm-hmm. Like, I would add 15 pieces of self-mill if I was going to pivot the deck into a Quorum deck.
Yeah, because if you don't have that self-mill, then your deck is doing absolutely nothing.
He doesn't do anything.
Whereas if you have Disa out, even if you are not self-milling, really, even if you're not... if you're not doing that self-milling, your deck is still functioning. It's not functioning as well, but at least you're still able to play your Tarmogoyfs. You're still able to attack. That's always going to be something that you'll be able to do.
Yeah. That being said, let's talk about the best cards in the deck. I think these are specifically built around Disa as the commander, so I wanted to talk about that before. And this one we've hinted at already, but is incredibly powerful with Disa on the battlefield.
Yeah, so the Maskwood Nexus specifically says it's a 4-mana artifact. Creatures you control are every creature type. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield, and you can make a 2/2 shapeshifter by tapping it and paying 3. But that doesn't matter as much. Could matter, because, those could be Lurgoyfs. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the first ability makes it so that literally any creature that you mill, any creature that you discard, anything that you're able to put in the graveyard, not from the battlefield, it doesn't matter if it's Lurgoyf or not. It's going straight onto the battlefield because of Disa's ability. Exactly. It now is a Lurgoyf because of Maskwood Nexus. So when this card is out, your deck is singing. Like, you are so happy to see this card. I wish there were more cards like this that you could slot in the deck, because then maybe you wouldn't have to index quite so hard into the Lurgoyf plan. But almost no matter what, you will be playing creatures that are not Lurgoyfs. And so this card makes it so that those cards will be Lurgoyfs.
Yeah.
And you can get a ton of value from it.
That being said, I think if this deck was built before, like, without any new cards in it, it would be very difficult to support a Lurgoyf deck.
Yeah.
But there are 15 new cards in this deck, and a number of those slots are dedicated to printing more Lurgoyfs that are at the power level of Commander. And the next best card that we're going to mention is itself a Lurgoyf. It's Barrow-Goyf. It's 2 and a black for a Lurgoyf with Death Touch and Lifelink. Its power is star. Its toughness is 1 and star. Of course, it's a Lurgoyf. And it says Barrow-Goyf's power is equal to the number of card types among cards in all graveyards, and its toughness is equal to that number plus 1. Whenever Barrow-Goyf deals combat damage to a player, you may mill that many cards. If you do, you may put a creature card from among them into your hand. This is so powerful.
It does so much.
This is a Lurgoyf for your Lurgoyf synergies. It's self-mill. And on top of that, if you hit creatures, it's card draw.
Yeah. And it's
selection.
It's a good attacker. It has Death Touch. Nobody wants to block this realistically.
Especially if it's like a 4/5 or a 3/4. It is very annoying to trade with something that has higher toughness and has Death Touch.
Yeah, and so if you have Disa as your commander, this card basically does it all. It does everything that the deck wants to do.
Yeah, you don't even have to return a creature. Oh no, you do. A creature that from among them into your hand. So you mill a certain number of cards if you hit a creature, you return it
from
to
those,
your hand. Yeah. But if you hit any Lurgoyfs in that, you can reanimate those Lurgoyfs from the graveyard to the battlefield with Disa, and you can return any other creature to your hand. That would be a serious swing. And then you make a Tarmogoyf if you deal combat damage.
So good. I find that in the Disa deck, if you have this card in your opening hand, you're always going to be happy, and the deck will always do its thing.
It also has lifelink.
Yeah, because why the heck not? Sure, let's put more abilities on this card.
There's so much going on with this card that just feels so pushed.
It's insane. I think for this strategy, this is the best Lurgoyf in the deck.
I mean, genuinely just as a creature, where if this
Also
thing comes
that, yeah.
down across from you and they play it as a 3-mana 3/4 with Death Touch and Lifelink that mills and draws them cards, you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
It feels like that kind of card.
It just fuels itself. It fuels itself.
Yeah, very high on Barrow-Goyf. I think it's going to feel really, really powerful in your opening hand.
For sure.
Exactly what we want out of this best card slot. Okay, so we've talked about how this deck is a little divided. We're going to get into the upgrade in just a second, but before we get there, I want to talk about what our goals were to getting this deck into fighting shape, getting the synergy we expect out of Commander decks these days.
Yeah, we've touched on it a little bit, but primarily the thing that we want to do is get rid of all the extraneous stuff, because it's very easy for you to look at something like this and say, oh, well, it mills. So might as well have some big creatures that you could mill and possibly cheat out. Oh, well, because we have that, well, let's have some reanimation and stuff in there as well. And so, like we said, the deck splits a ton of different ways. And so I think we just need to choose a lane. Either choose the Tarmogoyf lane or the Lurgoyf lane, or choose the self-mill lane. And that kind of dictates what you want your commander to be. For our purposes here, we are going to choose Disa because Disa is just the coolest. We have already discussed. It is
She's so
super
cool.
neat. And we want to play Tarmogoyfs. We want to get Tarmogoyfs and Lurgoyfs out into the battlefield. And we know you out there want that as well. But if you want to play the mill deck, that is totally fine. But you know the direction that you want to go with that. Add more mill support to this deck and take out the Lurgoyfs. Yeah. Pretty simple and straightforward.
Pretty straightforward.
We're not going to go that route today, however.
Some other changes we talked about with Disa is you really want evasive threats down before Disa hits the battlefield. You want 1-mana flyers that do something. You want 2-mana flyers that do something. Even Death Touchers like Barrow-Goyf is evasion. Great, we'll take that. Because when you play Disa for 5 mana, you want to at least get a body out of her.
Yeah, that would be nice.
The turn that she comes down. So making sure that we have creatures that can attack when Disa comes down is a big deal. But also we wanted lots of ways to make sure that if we get Goyfs in hand, we can get them into play. Or we're milling more so we can see more of the Goyfs and cheat them into play. Because that is a really, really powerful effect. I know that people are like, oh, the Lurgoyf isn't that good of a creature. But in this deck, it's a free creature that you can discard to a thrilling possibility into play.
There's such a huge difference in Magic. If you're a little bit more on the beginner side of things, between free and you have to pay mana for. A huge difference. If you've ever played Lightning Greaves versus Swiftfoot Boots, that 1 mana equip can oftentimes just be the difference between can you use it or not. And so even if the Lurgoyfs are 3 or 4 mana creatures, that's 3 or 4 mana that you have now saved.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. That adds up. So yeah, we want to try to be able to take advantage of that as much as possible.
Yeah. So definitely leaning into that, what is it, the second ability? The cheating lure Goyfs into play.
Templated, it's the first ability, but yeah, it does feel like the second ability.
And finally, the card advantage is just too low.
Yeah, we want more card draw.
We want to make sure that you are digging through your deck, you're getting the pieces that you want. You want to get to your Barragoyfs and draw more of your interactions. So Jund has the option to be able to interact with what's going on the battlefield.
It's Jund. You want to outvalue people, and if you're trying to go the long game, you just kind of need to be able to have the card draw in order to do so.
You need cards.
Yeah, you need cards to play Magic. Who'da thunk?
Man, I love this deck. It's my favorite of the bunch, and I'm so excited to share this upgrade with y'all. We're going to get to the 10 cards to add and the 10 cards to take out in just a few minutes after a few words from our sponsors.
When we moved into our new offices, it was a huge upgrade. Literally. This place is gigantic!
Which is great, but then you realize every single room needs
Tables,
chairs,
computer stuff,
decor.
We wanted the place to look nice, and obviously we want it to be Magic themed, so we're looking for stuff that's classy and high end.
And one of the coolest things we found was this Jace Beleren statue from Gatherer's Tavern.
Yeah, look at the incredible attention to detail. And it looks even better when it's all lit up. Plus it comes with interchangeable parts, so you can customize it with different poses. This is really the ultimate Magic collectible to be the centerpiece of your home, office, or gaming setup, especially if you're a blue mage like me.
Or for the true OG collectors, check out this Black Lotus relief sculpture. It's such an iconic part of Magic history, but also a fantastic art piece that'll get compliments from players and non-players alike. It even comes with a stunning metal card that makes great desk decor all on its own.
Or you can use it as a proxy in your Garth One-Eye deck.
We call that a 2-for-1.
You know we're obsessed with quality here at the Command Zone, and Gatherer's Tavern, they absolutely share those values. Each of these pieces is individually hand-sculpted and hand-painted. As you might imagine, that's an intricate process, and as a result, both of these items are very, very limited. They only created a handful, and once those are gone, that's it.
These were made for the serious collector, and it shows. I mean, look at them. They're so great, it kind of feels like they should have their own room. Do you think we need more space?
Oh, don't even talk to me about that.
He's still a little touchy about the move.
Go to GatherersTavern.com/CommandZone to get 5% off your purchase of these amazing premium collectibles.
If you want to show off your love of Magic, Gatherer's Tavern has the coolest and highest quality display pieces out there. So pick one up today and get 5% off any Magic the Gathering items on the site when you go to GatherersTavern.com/CommandZone.
Bruce and Silas, Vice Scots. This episode, just deserts.
Come on, Bruce. We're right on Oko's tail. We can bring this whole crime ring down. Ah! What happened to you?
The hot desert sun has changed me. I'm dying. Go on without me, Silas.
You're just dehydrated. You need Liquid IV, America's #1 powdered hydration brand. Here, just tear open a stick, pour it into your water, stir, and drink.
Hey, that's good.
Liquid IV comes in a ton of flavors and is easy to take with you on the go. I always carry an extra tube of sugar-free green grape with me, because whether you're chasing a criminal through the desert or just enjoying a summer day, heat is no joke. Luckily, Liquid IV has 8 vitamins and nutrients and 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink.
I feel the electrolytes working. Let's get that scumbag.
So hot, so tired.
Gotcha! Oko, more like Slowco.
How? I drank the leading sports drink!
Ha! That's where you went wrong, villain. Turn your ordinary water into extraordinary hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code COMMAND at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code COMMAND at liquidiv.com. And then I'm going to flash out Illusory Ambusher. I will bolt it to draw 3 cards. I will sneak attack out Triskaidekaphile. I'm going to go to my upkeep and I will win the game.
That was your first time playing the deck?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first time in paper. I've already goldfished it like 100 times on ARCHIDEKT. Their playtester is super user-friendly. Playing cards just takes 1 click, and you can mulligan, tutor, and move through your turns with the press of a key. There are simple menus with counters and copies, and you can take notes on cards as you play them.
ARCHIDEKT is the best place to browse, brew, and playtest commander decks. Just go to archidekt.com/CommandZone to get started.
That's ARCHIDEKT.com/CommandZone.
Welcome back, everybody. We are upgrading the Graveyard Overdrive Precon from Modern Horizons 3. We're going to get straight to these additions. These are the cards to add to get this deck in fighting shape for your next game night. Again, we're going to streamline the plan. We're going to add in some cheaper attackers and certainly get you some more card advantage here. Let's start with the most important category in a deck about Tarmogoyf.
The Goyfs.
The Goyfs.
Yeah, so this deck does already have most of the pretty playable ones.
Yeah.
So we're only going to add a couple here, but if there's a particular lure Goyf that you like, feel free to slam it in.
Get it in there.
Have fun. But for whatever reason, the biggest omission in this deck that we both thought was super strange is Tarmogoyf itself.
I know you're making tokens of him.
Yeah.
But he's a good boy.
Why isn't he in here already? It doesn't make any sense. Like, you are building an entire deck around the concept of Jund and Tarmogoyfs. So what, naturally, do you think you would put in there? Tarmogoyf?
Tarmogoyf!
Nope, we're not doing that.
Well, we're going to put him in today. And we're going to spend $10 to do so. Tarmogoyf is now a $10 card.
Woohoo!
Which he's a lot more affordable than he used to be. And honestly, he's pretty good in this deck. There's a lot of self-mill. Yeah. He gets pretty big pretty fast. He's going to be a good attacker that is synergistic with your commander. And again, he's free if you can discard him later. So love including the Tarmogoyf here.
Yeah, can't miss him. We're spending a fifth of our budget on him and totally worth it.
Yeah.
The next one is kind of cheating. It's Changeling Outcast.
It's a Tarmogoyf.
It's a Tarmogoyf. It's a Changeling, and it can't be blocked, and it's a 1-mana 1/1.
Perfect.
That's legitimately like everything this deck wants.
If there were 4 Changeling Outcasts, you'd play all of them.
You would play all of them.
It's 1 mana. It's unblockable. It's a Tarmogoyf. It does everything Disa wants to do, and it's only 50 cents. So here it is. The next category is called Boomer Jund.
Boomer Jund.
We gotta put more Boomer Jund cards in there.
So we were looking at this deck and we were thinking, okay, so this deck has a few more things that it needs. What can we put in instead of saying, hey, you should put in more card draw, put in, I don't know, Painful Truths, put in Phyrexian Arena. Boring. We're going to put in Boomer Jund cards to do the same thing. And so
these are iconically Jund cards that give you the value the deck is famous for, and maintain sort of the love letter to this deck, starting with the Boomery Jundest of all, I think.
Yeah, Dark Confidant.
Gotta have him.
Only at $8, which I was surprised about.
Got reprinted in Ravnica Remastered.
Yeah.
Brought it down a lot. Dark Confidant is here. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library, put that card into your hand, you lose life equal to its mana value. A little risky with some of these more expensive cards in there, but we're cutting a few of them later.
Spoiler alert, we're going to cut some of the expensive stuff. We're going to ease up a little bit on that reanimation package so that you can play stuff like Dark Confidant, and you'll still run into problems where you'll be like, all right, flip, whoop, that's a 5 or 6 mana card, whoopsies. But that's the fun of Jund. Like, come on. Come on. Sometimes it'll be lands.
Sometimes you die to Bob.
Sometimes you die to Bob. It's like dying to your mana crit.
Dark Confidant. Also super cheap. I don't discount Bob on turn 2 as an attacker for Disa. If you can power her out, there's always somebody who has awkward blocks. So it's a creature, it's cheap, and it's Bob.
Yeah, like we're talking about a little bit as like, haha, put Bob in, it's funny, it's a joke, but like legitimately having your card drop be able to attack in order to trigger Disa, huge.
Yeah, we'll take that. Up next. So much of this budget is just putting Boomer Jund into the deck.
We're putting in Liliana the Veil.
Yeah!
Everybody.
She got reprinted too, as currently sitting at $15.
I was looking at all these, I'm like, these cards would all be so fun, but there's no way they're cheap enough. They are cheap enough. They all got reprinted. Thank you, Wizards of the Coast, for reprinting all these cards so I can have my Boomer Jund cards.
I love this deck so much.
In my Jund deck. Oh, makes me so happy.
Plus, Lily's also pretty good in this deck. She's a 3-mana planeswalker, which is great because you have all of these Tarmogoyfs to block. She has a discard outlet, so everybody else is discarding cards. You're discarding Tarmogoyfs or Lurgoyfs into the graveyard, cheating them straight into play.
Mm-hmm.
That's her uptick.
Yeah, that's great.
And then you can absolutely snipe somebody out of nowhere and have them sacrifice a creature on her minus.
Yeah, getting the board clear so that you have a good or a couple good attacks with your Tarmogoyfs once you start to get that engine going is critical. So being able to have repeatable removal plus a repeatable way to get those Lurgoyfs into the graveyard for the free reanimation, I think is a really, really good include.
We should also read her ultimate because it's not totally out of reach.
Yeah, what does her ultimate even do? All right, we're going to read it. Mm-hmm. Buckle up. I've never read this before. All right. -6. Separate all permanents target player controls into 2 piles. That player sacrifices all permanents in the pile of their choice. Oh.
You want your lands or your things?
Or do you want some of your lands and some of your things, or the rest of your lands and the rest of your things? It can be whatever pile you want.
Liliana! I love that she can be in this deck, and I love that there's very real synergy there. We'll talk about that. There's a lot of great opportunities to like cheat Goyfs onto the battlefield and put them into the graveyard and put them back in your hand and cheat them back onto the battlefield. Disa does a lot of broken stuff if you know how to build around it. And Liliana really does give you a ton of value when you're not discarding a card.
One thing that we should mention as well, which we haven't really talked about, is because Tarmogoyf counts the number of card types in your graveyard, you want a nice spread of those. And so because Liliana is a planeswalker, that gives you more opportunities to then be able to mill said planeswalker. So even if you're not casting Liliana, if you mill Liliana, that is now that planeswalker type, which is not super common in Commander, that you can get for your Tarmogoyfs.
I love that.
It's perfect. Oh.
And you're making your opponents discard, so they could be discarding a wider variety of card types as well. So it's going to buff your Tarmogoyfs long term.
Huge.
I put this next category is called discard. It goes along with Liliana of the Veil, but these are some of my favorite cards from.
Yeah, you read this one. This is a Rachel Week special right here.
Tortured Existence is so good in this deck. Tortured Existence is an enchantment for a single black. It has an activated ability that's black. Choose and discard a creature card. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So the cost is discarding a card, which means if you have a Goyf in your hand, you can discard it, cheat it into play, and return a Goyf from your graveyard to your hand, then discard that and get another creature from your graveyard to your hand. Now you have 2 Goyfs in play, and you have a creature that was in your graveyard in your hand?
Pretty good. I mean, even
if you have a creature in your hand and you discard it to get a Goyf and discard the Goyf onto the battlefield to get the creature back that you just discarded, now you just have a Goyf on the battlefield.
Yeah, because that's one thing can oftentimes happen is you play out some of your Lurgoyfs and then they die, they go to the graveyard, and then how are you supposed to cheat them back out? Well, with Tortured Existence, you can do like this little like dance of like swapping creatures from your graveyard and your hand, and when you do that little dance, well, Disa will trigger, and Disa will get you all those Lurgoyfs out. And even if you're not trying to get those Lurgoyfs, being able to have access to any creature that you end up milling at instant speed at any time is very powerful.
This card's awesome.
So good.
And it's like $3 right now. That's wild.
Yeah.
It's really, really powerful. It's very efficient. And it's another card type that's good, hard to hit sometimes. It's an enchantment.
Yeah. Even if you aren't building this deck outright, give Tortured Existence a look. Yeah. It's a cool card.
So cool.
It does a lot.
Speaking of difficult card types.
So there's a lot of different card types in Magic the Gathering.
I mean, there's instant sorcery creature, enchantment artifact, land, the planeswalker, kindred, and battles.
Yeah. So we were looking through the entire deck list, and there are a couple kindred cards already in this deck. So we have that covered. But there's no battles in the deck straight out of the gate. And so we were thinking, well, why not put a battle in? Let us live the dream of having a maxed out Tarmogoyf.
9-10 Tarmogoyf?
Oh, that has not been possible for that long. It's only been possible since the addition of battles as card types. So, of course, we're going to add a battle to make that happen.
Almost perfect. Love that. Invasion of Mercadia is the battle that we chose to add. 1 and a red for a battle siege. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw 2 cards.
Yeah. And again, the reason is good in this one is it's just card selection. And you can dump Lurgoyfs, you can dump whatever you need. Like, this deck already is messing with the graveyard, so being able to choose what you want to put into the graveyard is crucial.
So normally when you spend 2 mana, you discard a card, you draw 2 cards. It's just card selection.
Yes.
You're trading 2 cards for 2 cards. But in this, if you can discard a Lurgoyf from your hand, it becomes card advantage. Now you're spending 1 card to put 1 card onto the battlefield, which is already insanely busted.
Yeah, you're cheating mana.
But you also get 2 new cards. So you've spent 1 for 3? That's an extreme amount of value, which is closer to the kind of card trade that you want in Commander. Invasion of Mercadia is very good. If you flip it, it's also a discard outlet on the back, which is pretty good. But it's not as relevant as the front side.
Yeah. Gives your creatures haste. Why not?
Yeah.
Could be very relevant.
It makes 2 boys that'll block.
Yeah, get your Tarmogoyfs out and then give them haste.
It gives creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. So it makes all your Tarmogoyfs regular power. Which
Honestly,
is
that
funny.
makes it easier to track.
This next card is cracked in the deck.
Yeah, so we were wanting big card draw that we could draw lots of cards with. And one thing that will cover your bases very easily is Greater Good, where you can sacrifice a creature to draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, then discard 3 cards. Oh boy, this gets out of hand fast. Like the discarding 3 cards, like we were talking about before, not always a downside. Again, because you can discard those Lurgoyfs or anything else that you want to be in your graveyard. And you draw a billion cards, and it fuels your Tarmogoyfs to make them even bigger, to then sacrifice to the Greater Good for more. If you get Greater Good out on the battlefield, and you already have a single Tarmogoyf that is like 3 or 4 power already, like you are in great shape.
It's so fun in this deck. You sack it like a 3/4 Goyf, draw 3, discard 3, cheat a Goyf into play, or don't. Now,
or don't. We don't care. It's Greater Good.
If you can cheat another Goyf into play, so you can sack that Goyf again, you'll draw your whole deck. You'll mill everything. You'll have every Goyf in your deck in play.
Yeah, that's not crazy.
It's really sweet in the deck. Definitely worth the $10 to pick up a copy of Greater Good.
It also gives you something to do with your Tarmogoyfs other than just having them sit there and be big. Because they don't really have trample or anything. They don't really have invasion. Might as well.
This next category is we're adding a little bit of self-mill here as well to get that 11 number up a little bit higher. I would consider Greater Good self-mill as well.
Yep. Self-mill in big air quotes.
But, it fills up your graveyard in a similar way. But
yeah, it does what you would want with the self-mill. It's just a little bit later on is where this usually is good. That being said, we probably want stuff that is milling you a little bit earlier on. So that way when your Tarmogoyfs come out, they're more than 0/1s. Helpful. And so a good include is Eye Collector. This is 1 black flyer from Throne of Eldraine, I believe. When it deals combat damage to a player, each player mills 1 card, and it's a 1/1. So, again, it does everything the deck wants. It gets a mill for you and for everybody else, putting as many card types as possible in the graveyard from your Tarmogoyfs so that they're a decent size when they come out. And it is also a flyer, so it's evasive, meaning that you can almost always get that combat damage in with whenever Disa comes out. Make those Tarmogoyfs right away.
this is exactly the kind of card I like to include in these decks that just checks so many boxes. Evasive flyer, self-mill, 50 cents.
Once again, if there were more of these, we would put in probably more of these.
The only thing that would make this better is if this was a Goyf.
Well, that's what Changing Outcast is for.
Eye Collector, really, really good. It's only 50 cents. It is worth putting into this deck, no problem.
Yeah. And then the other one that we wanted to include was Skull Prophets. It's a black and a green, 3/1, taps for either a green or a black, and you can tap it to mill 2. So again, this like we've been talking about a lot, what you want to do with your includes is, because Disa has so many things that it wants to do, try to include cards that is encompassing as many of those things that she does as you possibly can. This ramps, this gets Disa out early. This self-mills you, so that way your Goyfs can be bigger. It is also an attacker. So once you have Disa out there, then it can just be, well, it's a 3/1, and sure, it doesn't have much toughness, but you can start slamming it all over the place and see what you can get as far as combat damage through in order to get more Tarmogoyfs. So for only 2 mana and a total of $1.25, that is some good value. And in Jund, we're all about that good value.
Yeah. We've got one more card we want to add to this deck, and it was all you. It's very clever.
I was trying to think if this worked. I love having like a fun slot.
So Disa says, whenever a Lurgoyf permanent card is put into your graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, put it onto the battlefield. So normally it's from your hand, that's from your library to the battlefield.
Yeah. So that being said, let's read this cool, fun card from Scars of Mirrodin block called Mimic Vats. It's got Imprint. It's an artifact. Whenever a non-token creature dies, you may exile that card. If you do, return each other card exiled with Mimic Vat to its owner's graveyard. And then you can pay 3 and copy whatever is imprinted with the Mimic Vat. But, full stop. You can basically use Mimic Vat as like a temporary resting spot for any Lurgoyf that you have that dies. So normally the Lurgoyf goes to the graveyard, it's stuck there. It went to the graveyard from the battlefield, you can't get it back. But if it dies to this Mimic Vat, that's like a temporary holding place for it. And then the second something else dies, the Lurgoyf that you had imprinted with your Mimic Vat then goes to your graveyard. Disa checks it and it was like, oh, that was put to the graveyard, not from the battlefield. I'm going to put that onto the battlefield. And so you just have like all these Lurgoyfs that will never actually die.
That's so sweet.
It's so cool.
I mean, picture that with greater good. Like if you have two, if you have two Goyfs.
Yeah. Oh, I'm picturing it, Rachel. Ooh.
You can sacrifice a Goyf, put it under Mimic Vat, draw the cards, discard the cards. Sacrifice another Goyf, put that under the Mimic Vat, put the original Goyf into your graveyard, back to the battlefield.
Yeah, legitimately, if you have
you can draw your whole deck.
If you have Greater Good and Mimic Vat and Goyfs that are a decent size, your entire deck is now in your hand. And presumably you're doing other things as well. Like those are just two pieces of the puzzle, but you're filling your graveyard, you're drawing cards that can also do things la-di-da-di-da.
Not to mention like the original intention for Mimic Vat.
That's very true. And if this was just like a fun, cheeky card where it has this really neat effect but doesn't do anything else, and if Disa's not on the board then doesn't do anything, that might feel a little bit bad. But you can still just throw it out there and it will still do the Mimic Vat thing of you can just snipe an Esper Sentinel when it dies and then you can make a copy of it. So it's very, very flexible. You can do a lot of things with this card, and almost every time you play it, you'll be like, oh, I can do that. Oh, I can do that. And then your opponents will be like, oh, they can do that. So I think it is super, super neat.
Very cool shenanigans with Mimic Vat. Only 50 cents to pick one up. Worth it if you're doing this kind of like Saki loop stuff that we're talking about with your Goyfs. All of this included, you were so careful about your budget this time because we made a lot of space for some pricey staples. And the total budget is
pricey old modern staples.
$49. Gorgeous, $1 to spare. That's yours to keep.
We saved you $1. You're welcome, everybody out there.
Pretty sweet. I love these ads. I think they really add a lot of shenanigans that the deck isn't. The deck is a little fair currently.
Yeah, let's make it a little unfair.
I know Jund's supposed to be fair, but like, it's Commander Jund. It's a little different.
Yeah, we'll make it fair, and then at a point you hit the gas, and then you get to the unfair point, and that's where you start to win the games.
All right, we've added 10 cards, which means we have to do the hardest thing in
cards
Commander.
To cut.
We got to cut 10 cards.
These are always the hardest, especially nowadays where Commander decks are usually pretty darn tight. You look at all these cards and they're lots of fun. But at the very least, the card type that we thought was easiest to cut, again, we've alluded to it a couple times, the Reanimation Package.
Yeah, the deck doesn't quite need this. We're already looping creatures in and out of the battlefield. We have big creatures that are 4 mana or 3 mana. We don't necessarily need this big expensive top end. So the first cut that we talked about was Archon of Cruelty. This is a very, very powerful creature. But the only way to get it into play is to either turn it into a Tarmogoyf or cast it for 8 mana. And there's the very sort of limited reanimation spells in the deck, one of which we're cutting.
There's like Liliana's Death's Majesty
two of which
in here.
We're cutting, actually. So Archon of Cruelty, take it out, put it into another deck. It's really, really sweet when you can cheat creatures into play.
Absolutely.
But in here, it's a little too fair.
Yeah. Next, we're going to cut the Junji, the Midnight Sky. Again, we talked about this as one of the cool new reprints in here. And that's great. Now that we're cutting this, you can take this reprint and go put it in a deck where it will fit a little bit better.
Alongside the Archon of Cruelty.
The Archon of Cruelty, maybe in something where you're doing a lot more reanimating and sacrificing. I know we put Greater Good in, but this deck doesn't actually have a ton of sacrifice outlets right out of the gate. And so having something that's only triggers when it dies feels a little bit strange. It's a fine card, but not necessarily on our game plan.
Up next is similar, actually. It's Infested Thrynax. This is a new card. It's 3 black-green for a flash lizard. When it enters the battlefield until end of turn, whenever a non-token creature you control dies, create a number of 1/1 green sapperling creature tokens equal to that creature's power. That's a lot of 1/1 sapperlings, but this is not the kind of deck that can hold up 5 mana indefinitely until a board wipe happens. And there's no guarantee that when a board wipe does happen, it's going to kill your things.
Yeah.
Or just as likely to be a Farewell that exiles your graveyard or be a Cyclonic Rift that bounces your board. It's not quite efficient enough for a deck that moves at sorcery speed.
Yeah, and again, you're not really doing too much sacrifice shenanigans in this deck, and so you can't really be the one to choose when your creatures are dying. At least not all that often.
If you can, this card is extremely powerful.
Yeah, find a home for it in a deck that can do that. You'll be very happy.
Until end of turn, whenever a non-token creature you control dies. Yeah, I mean,
until end of turn.
Like if you can set up one of these loops that we're talking about, this card is extremely powerful.
Yeah.
But that requires Greater Good and an Infested Thrynax, and it's a lot of 5 mana permanents to have in play all at the same time.
We're sticking to the Goyf plan for this one.
I genuinely think this card is very cool in the right spot.
Very
but
much is.
You have to have at least 15 sack outlets in your deck for it to really, really consider an include.
At least 15? I don't know if at least 15. That seems a little much. You would put 15?
I mean,
like 15 would be your limit?
10.
Okay, at least 10 I could see, but saying at least 15, that's
15's a lot, but you don't want your 5 drops to be dead ever.
Yeah, but it's cool. I don't want
cool.
that many sack outlets. I want cool creatures, Rachel.
Well,
let me play my cool creatures
with sack outlets on them.
Okay, good idea. Put Yahenni in there.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yahenni's awesome.
All right, we're building a black deck.
Up next is the second reanimation effect that we are cutting. It's Deathbridge Chant.
Yeah, Deathbridge Chant is a 6-mana enchantment that reanimates things at random from your graveyard. This is a Dragon's Maze card. That is the set that I started playing. I looked at this card and thought, that's neat. And then I played with this card and thought, this never does what I want because it's at random.
Yeah, it's a lot of mana to spend on something maybe good.
Yeah. You don't get any selection. Again, it's a 6-mana enchantment. Just doesn't really do what you want for the price that you want it to.
Yeah. So that one's getting cut, and we're cutting a lot of the top end. So it just gets a little less good in the deck overall.
Yeah. So that's mostly the reanimation package that we are cutting. This next one, I feel a little bit bad about, but it's a new card, Exterminator Magmark. 2, a black and a red, 5/3. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single non-land permanent an opponent controls, if another opponent controls one or more non-land permanents that spell could target, choose one of those permanents, copy that spell. The copy targets the chosen permanents. And you can regenerate this because, sure. Why not?
Turns your single target removal into 2 target removal.
Yes. So that is kind of the joke of this. So it feels bad to be cutting this very fun, like, Jund joke of like, it's a 2-for-1. It makes all of your single target removal into 2-for-1s. The problem is, this deck doesn't actually have that much single target removal.
Yeah.
You have things like Kolaghan's Command, which are oftentimes targeting 2 things. And this says targets only a single non-land permanent. So whenever you have that, you have to either feel bad and say, I'm going to choose to only target the one thing, or
you get less of a 2-for-1. Yeah,
it just feels bad.
It's sort of curious. I mean, and some of the single target removal is like, Grist, which doesn't work with this.
Exactly.
So it's a little bit more of a build around, and especially I think this brew is a little bit more creature based.
Yeah, we're going more graveyard-y shenanigans with this, I think. And so if you want to do something that's a little bit more spell slingery, I think that this card goes in that deck for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably not here.
Up next is Garruk, Apex Predator. This is 7 mana. Garruk, he's got 4 abilities. He ticks up to destroy another planeswalker. Okay. Sure. He ticks up to make a 3/3 beast with Death Touch. Sure. He ticks down to destroy target creature. You gain life equal to its toughness.
Great, but it's 7
mana removal spell.
Are you sure you want that?
And then a -8, which takes a long time to get there. Target opponent gets an emblem with whenever a creature attacks you, it gets +5/+5 and gains what? Target opponent gets an emblem. I see. Whenever a creature attacks you, it gets +5/+5 and gains trample until end of turn. It's not that good of an emblem.
But it's really funny.
Yeah.
It's really funny.
There's not a lot of synergy with this, and we put in a better planeswalker that's cheaper.
Yeah, that was my thought process as well. Like, we're putting in Liliana the Veil, we can pull out a planeswalker that doesn't really do anything that overlaps with the strategy of the deck. Next card that we're cutting is Tempt with Mayhem. This is 1 red instant, Tempting Offer. Choose target instant or sorcery spell. Each opponent may copy that spell and may choose new targets for the copy. You copy the spell once, plus an additional time for each opponent who copied the spell this way. Choose new targets for the copies. So this is a cool card, but like we kind of alluded to, we are not really doing much of a spell sling or anything. You're not really like looking to leave up 3 mana for causing a lot of mayhem. Like this card
I love this card.
This is a really fun card, but again, take it out of here, put it in a deck that's a little bit more chaotic, a little bit more like trying to just mess with things, trying to do a lot of an instant or sorcery, perhaps.
A little bit less permanent based.
Yeah. So, like it, not the home for it.
Up next is Burnished Heart. It's a 2-for-1.
It's Burnished Heart.
You get 2 lands for 1 elk.
You're not reanimating the Burnished Heart, right? Yeah. Unless you have the Maskwood Nexus, you're not really doing anything. You're not like getting the Burnished Heart from the mill or anything. And you're paying 6 mana for an Explosive Vegetation. The deck already has enough ramp. You don't need a Burnished Heart.
You're in green. You don't need a Burnished Heart. Up next, we're cutting Altar of the Goyf.
Another one that I feel pretty bad about, but
this is tough. There's a lot to like about this. But most of it's on the type line. It's Kindred, Artifact, Lurgoyf. That's basically where the benefits end. It's whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of card types among cards in all graveyards. Lurgoyf creatures you control have Trample. So it's 5 mana to give some of your creatures Trample, and it's a Lurgoyf that you can cheat into play for free, and it's Kindred when it's in your graveyard, but it's probably not going to be in your graveyard because it's a Lurgoyf.
Yeah. So it feels really bad, at least to me, to be cutting the card that basically only goes with a Lurgoyf deck. Like,
it doesn't go here, where does it
there's
go?
no other home for this. So if you all out there are thinking, hey, I just really want to play this card, go ahead and play this card. It's not that bad. The problem with it is, 1, it's 5 mana. 5 mana is a lot. And so unless you're cheating it out, like you said, with Thesis ability, the 5 mana is almost not going to be worth it, and it's going to get stuck rotting in your hand. And yes, it gives your Lurgoyf Trample, which can be very helpful.
But if you already have a bunch of big Goyfs, like,
you're fine. You're fine.
Need
Yeah. And you can get Trample or Evasion for a lot cheaper. If you're paying 5 mana for something, just play an Overrun. Like, I don't know.
It's just not quite, it doesn't quite do enough, unfortunately.
It hurts me so much to be cutting this card, but I think it is for the best of trying to make this deck as good as it possibly can. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to cut fun cards for that.
We did cut some of the instants and sorcery shenanigans, so we're cutting this big instant and sorcery as well. It's Bituminous Blast. This is a 5 mana instant with Cascade that deals 4 damage to target creature. So again, you spend 1 card, remove a creature, and you get a free card off of it. It's a 2-for-1, but it's just not efficient enough.
5 mana for 4 damage? Like, yes, you get a free thing, but I don't know. Doesn't feel great.
Yeah, not quite.
And again, your targeted removal and stuff, it's fine as is. You don't need this.
You've got plenty, and we cut down on some of the spell stuff, so it's easy to take Bituminous Blast out.
Easy.
All right. Those are the cuts. 10 in, 10 out.
I always feel so down after the cuts. I'm like, but I like these cards. I just want to play these cards.
I know. We'll go back. Let's go back to the ads.
All right, back to it.
They're cool.
We're not going to cut all these cards.
Mimic that.
We're going to play with 110 cards and no one will stop us.
All right, so now that we've cut 10 cards, what does the deck look like? How do you expect it to play out?
Yeah, so from the playtesting with this deck, primarily what you want is you want something that can be an evasive threats and something that can mill so that you can get the Tarmogoyf's big, and so that you can actually be able to deal combat damage to get Disa's trigger. Because if you're not doing either of those things, why are you playing Disa as your commander? You're not really doing much. So whenever you're mulliganing, I think those are pretty important things to have. If you don't have those in hand, even if it's like, yes, I have lands and I have spells, if you don't at least have both of those things, I'd at least think about throwing it back. Like, you better have a darn good reason for keeping that hand.
Yeah, I think ramp is a big deal as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of why we like Skull Prophet so much in this deck, is it feels really good in your opening hand.
Yeah, anything that can pull double duty is perfect. Like these cards that we added that can pull double duty are what you want in your openers, because they will get you where you need to be with only 1 or 2 cards per se, when your deck's actually trying to do like 3 or 4 different things.
Yeah, there's some really neat tricks that this deck has. I don't know if you want to look for those in your opening hand. Obviously, if there's some very high potential cards like Greater Good, that's always good. But this is going to be a very curve-dependent deck. Having ramp on 2 or even ramp on 3 if you want to play an evasive creature on 1 or 2 to get to your commander on 5. The nice thing about having a 5-mana planeswalker or 5-mana commander, is you do 2-mana ramp isn't that much better than 3-mana ramp in terms of just getting your commander out a turn earlier. It'll help you get to your 4-drops faster if you have 2-mana ramp, of course. But if you're just trying to get to Disa a turn earlier, then you can take actions on turn 1 or turn 2, play a slightly better mana rock with a higher ceiling on turn 3, and then your commander on turn 4 and attack.
Yeah, I think the ideal curve is an evasive threat on 1 or 2. You throw out a ramp piece like a Cultivate or something on 3, and then by turn 4, you now cast your Disa, and away you go.
Yeah, I mean, when you can afford to cast your ramp a little bit later in your curve, it means you get to play more impactful ramp. Yep. You get to play Cultivate, which not only ramps you a card, but also lets you hit your next land drop. It draws you a card. So I think that's a very cool thing to consider when you have a 5-mana commander, is your whole curve shifts just a little bit.
Yeah, and once you get at least one Tarmogoyf out, then we keep saying you're off to the races, but realistically, you are in pretty good shape because Disa wants you to be attacking with creatures. And so once you are able to get that first creature out there, and then the next turn, you can attack with that creature, and you can attack with Disa, as well as presumably what you had before.
And whatever Tarmogoyf you made the turn before.
Exactly. So now you have 3 things, just in and of themselves, in order to attack, hopefully send 1 at each player, at the very least get damage through on 1 other person, and then that starts adding up really, really quickly. And
This deck also just really wants to grind. You don't have to be super, super aggressive when you know that you've got strong attack pieces, you've got strong defense pieces. You don't need to commit Disa to the board too early if you're just setting up and getting a little bit of value.
That's a good point. Like, make sure that you get your setup pieces out there before Disa, because if you can't make use of Disa, you are just putting her at risk for no reason. She's a 5-mana commander. If she dies, that's 7 mana. That is a huge tempo loss for you.
Yeah.
So make sure that you have that set up to be able to take advantage, because if you can at least get 1 Tarmogoyf, if Disa dies, okay, not the end of the world. You have a big blocker that can stem the bleeding of whatever aggression is going to be coming your way. So I think that's just very important whenever you're playing this deck.
Yeah, you don't have to rush with this kind of deck.
Yeah, just jund them out. Jund them out.
Just wait. Outlast. You can do it.
Outlive. Outplay?
Yeah.
What other? Outrun?
Mill?
Outcast?
Outside. What are we doing?
I don't know. We should touch grass more. We should actually go
outside.
Yep. The mythical outside. Crazy.
I think this deck is so fun. I think
cool.
it's the commander's really neat. The theme's really neat. There's so many cards in it that you get to be like, we get to play this in Commander. We never get to play this in Commander.
I love decks that suddenly open up fun archetypes that you possibly have never even thought of before. Like, it's never crossed my mind. I want to play Modern Jund in Commander. And yet somebody out there thought, wouldn't that be neat? Made this deck, and whoever did that, I salute you.
We see you.
We see you, and
great.
we love it. More of this, please.
So fun. So fun. To the listeners, what do you think of this Precon? Any cards we missed? Any cards we suggested to take out or add that you're like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? You should need to have this, or you shouldn't have that. Let us know. We read the comments. We like to engage with you guys. And when other players want to build Disa or maybe want to build Quorum, they'll be in the comments looking at suggestions. So leave your productive comments, and we're excited you enjoyed the video.
Yeah, thanks.
If you want to pick up this Precon, any of the singles that we talked about, if you want to go buy a Tarmogoyf, go to cardkingdom.com/command. They have a huge selection of singles and sealed product. Tarmogoyf specifically has a wonderful old border where you get a funky little curve on it.
Oh, from Future Sight?
From Future Sight. If you want to get a fancy Tarmogoyf, that's
Future Sight borders always bother me because every single corner is one way. They're like, I forget if they're all rounded and then one is square, or they're all square and then one's rounded, and it drives me insane. Like, I love the card frame except for that design decision, and I'm like, who did this? I don't like you. No, just kidding. Yeah, you're great. You made excellent stuff. But
You can pick up that Tarmogoyf or whatever Tarmogoyf you want over at Card Kingdom. They've got a huge selection of cards, so hopefully they have the Tarmogoyf for you. You could even buy a whole bunch of Tarmogoyfs and use them as tokens. That's a flex.
The deck comes with Tarmogoyf tokens. You don't need
that's
to
a
do
huge
that.
flex. You should do that. That's
Sure.
cool. You can pick up all of those cards while supporting the show. It means a lot, and it costs you guys nothing but to just throw that little backslash on there and helps us out. So, cardkingdom.com/command.
Yeah, and getting your game accessories all up to snuff with your cool new deck, ultrapro.com/command is the place to go in order to do that. You can also buy Ultra Pro products at your LGS. They have all the sleeves, all the playmats, all the dice, all the deck boxes that can match your cool new DISA deck. Whatever you're building, there's always going to be something that is going to match either the art or the theme, or you just like some of the cool colors that they've got on Ultra Pro's websites. They got all sorts of fun playmats. They got discounts on the site all the time.
They just released a new color series that's white playmats with the big color logos on them. They're very slick. You can get like artists to draw on them at Magic Cons and stuff. They're pretty cool.
That's the thing I love about Ultra Pro products is that there's such like a wide range of stuff. You want something minimalist, Ultra Pro's got you covered. If you want something that's like super like crowded and there's like a giant piece of art,
a giant shiny dog on it,
a giant shiny dog,
perhaps,
sure.
A giant shiny dog.
Ultra Pro has got you covered, and again, ultrapro.com/command is the best place to go to do that because they got deals on there all the time. You'll find awesome stuff you never even knew that you wanted on there. If you just go on there, browse, it's pretty neat.
All right. We've talked a lot about Magic. We're going to take a moment at the end step here to talk about something outside the world of Magic. And Murph, I hear you have something prepared for us.
I always have show and tell prepared, if at all possible. So, what I have in front of me, for all the audio listeners, is a copy of Monster Hunter Freedom Unite for the PlayStation Portable.
Why am I not shocked?
Yeah, Rachel is very not surprised that this is the end step because I've been playing this on PSP with Eric Lim, who's edits the podcast, and Evan Limburger, who does VFX for us. And so this is a very fun game where you can hunt monsters, and that's pretty much it. It's like an RPG, but your character never gains stats. The only thing you can do is craft armor, craft other weapons in order to give you better stats. So your character never levels up, but all of your gear does.
Isn't that the truth?
That's true.
That's my commander career. I've gotten more expensive sleeves, but I don't get any better, baby.
Exactly.
This is what you get.
This is what you're stuck with. So your skills grow and all of your gear grows as well, and that lets you fight like bigger and better monsters. And so it's a really fun and really rewarding game to play, and you can play with other people. And so the ridiculous thing that we've been doing is trying to get 3 people with PSPs in the year of our Lord 2024. But we have managed to do it. We have an entire like hunting party. We'll all over lunchtime like get our PSPs out and like go on a hunt together, all locally. It's super fun. What you can also do with this that I learned is if you have a PlayStation 3, you can take your PSP, take the Wi-Fi signal from your PSP, run it through your PS3, and then send that through the internet to somebody else that has a PS3 and also a PSP as well. So not only do I have 3 people with PSPs, but we were also able to track down 3 PlayStation 3s so that we can all play at home.
It's very cute.
So I bought like a spare PlayStation 3 specifically for Evan because he was like, I want to play at home with you guys, but I don't have a PS3. So I'm like, all right, I got you. So I bought a broken PS3.
Did you fix it?
Online. I was like, I think it's, it said no video was coming out at Powers On. So I was like, okay, well, maybe it's on the wrong input because PlayStation 3s have like an HDMI and they have like an old thing that can support like the yellow, white, red cables. So I was like, hopefully it's that. I know you can just hold the button for like 5 seconds or something. It'll reset it, put it back to whatever you need. And hopefully that's the problem. That was not the problem. So I opened it up and turns out what it needed is the graphics processor needed reballed. Basically, the connection to the motherboard was not great anymore. And so it just wasn't getting good enough connection, and so nothing would boot. And so as a result, I was like, all right, what are the fixes out there? And what people recommended was
a hug.
To put pennies on top of your graphics processor. Because what that does is there's always like something on top of it that like presses down on it to give a little bit of pressure to it. If you put pennies, that acts as a spacer and presses the graphics processor down even more into the board to try to reestablish the connection. So I took copper pennies, which had to be copper.
I was going to say.
You had to check the dates of these pennies.
To make sure they're actually made
of copper. I put 4 onto the graphics processor, put thermal paste below and above it, just the right amounts. Don't want to overheat the thing. Don't want its thermals to still be good. Put it back together, and it works. I can't believe it works. Putting pennies like inside of your PlayStation 3 for this particular problem worked. And I have no idea how long this will last. There's no way this is like a long-term solution, but at the very least, we can play Monster Hunter together as a crew from the comfort of our own home, which the fact that still exists in 2024 is crazy to me. Because this is a game from like 2007, 2008, something like that. So this is not a recent game, but we are having a ton of fun.
All right, before we go, we're going to say thank you to our amazing team here at the Command Zone. Thank you to Damon Lenz, Eric Lem, Megan Yip, Gaurav Galati, Jordan Pridgeon, Jamie Block, Arthur Meadowcroft, Manson Lung, Jake Boss, Sam Waldo, Evan Limburger, Katie Cole, Mitch Trafford, Josh Lee Kwai, Jimmy Wong, and of course to Josh Murphy for taking the time to upgrade Disa No Rest for the Restless. This deck is so sweet. I'm going to play it out of the box for a while, and then I do want to add like more. I want to add a Deathrite Shaman and like Liliana the Veil and have it be a full Boomer Jund deck because it
sounds so fun.
So cool. It's such a cool idea. Thanks for watching, everybody. We will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
For your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @JoshLeeQuai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.
AD cast Invasion of Segovia last night, and I was singing the Genovian theme song.
Genovia. From Princess Bride.
Princess Diaries.
That's Princess Diaries. Yeah.
And he was like,
I always get those two names confused.
And he was like, what is that? I'm like,
you never watched Princess Diaries?
I don't know.
With Anne Hathaway?
I don't know. You knew Anne Hathaway was
classic.
in it. I know.
You know it's not an all-time classic? Princess Diaries 2.
I don't know.
But you like Princess Diaries 2? Rachel likes nice. Princess Diaries 2. It is not a very good movie.
No.
I mean, the first one, at the very least, like...
It's got Raven Simone in it.
It's pretty formulaic and pretty generic.
Yeah.
But it's a feel-good movie.
But you know what's
right?
also formulaic?
What?
Box brownies, Murph. And those are delicious.
Those are delicious.